I hope you are sitting comfy spot somewhere with a wee beverage to keep you hydrated and your brain is ready to engage. I'm Alice Sharp, your host for this week's TTS Talking Early Years podcast. I'm a teacher, an educator, confidence speaker, and an author of a continuous professional development program called Adventures with Alice. Throughout this series, we're exploring the magic of play-based learning in the early years. We're turning a lens on how this approach supports the development of key skills for our children and, of course, our staff too. I'll be talking to a number of educational experts as we aim to inspire you all every day for your work and to unlock the potential for learning in our lovely sector. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce two fabulous ladies. Liz Ludden and Sue Egersdorff are today's guests. Can you imagine it, guys? Hello, ladies. How are you today?
Great, thank you.
I remember a little project or two, in fact, that I guess I didn't think of them as intergenerational, but and we wouldn't have referred to them as that, but they, I think, were. And one of them was called Reuse, Recycle and Repurpose. And it was a project that encouraged people in the community that had skills. So they weren't, retired people, they weren't an older generation, all of them. It was just anybody who had skills to come into the nursery and share those skills. And they had two very mature men who did volunteer, and one of them sang sea shanties with the children, and in fact had to change quite a lot of the words when he was sharing them. And another one was a retired carpenter, and he used to sit when the children were being told stories, or they were sharing stories in the story corner, and he used to whittle little wooden creatures for the children to play with in the small world. And there was old ladies who knitted, and very stereotypically the men were carpenters and the women were knitters, but that's what happened. So I wonder if we could switch our focus a wee bit onto some of the activities, guys, that you are seeing carried out in this fabulous approach that you're describing to us.
Well, Liz is the one to talk about sustainability, and she'll wow you with some of those ideas of things we've tried. But just first, to start this section off, really, we don't talk about activities, which is really interesting. We talk about invitations, opportunities, and experiences, because what we find from older people is sometimes the activities that are on offer to them in care homes they don't want to do. So they just want to come along for a natter, and they go, I don't want to be colouring this in or doing that. I just want to come along for a coffee and a natter. So we think it's better to invite them and talk about the experiences. And that's been really powerful, that shift from activities which feel like it's something done to you. So between 2 and 4 o'clock this afternoon, there'll be this activity, like some cruise ship. Yeah. So we've really moved away from that to say the children would like to invite you, or would you like to invite the children? And that's a powerful shift in language. So Liz will explain what we've been doing around the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think you'll find that interesting.
Yeah, we've recently set up a men's workshop. We're trying to think of a really fancy name for it, but that's what it is. Everyone who works in early years will know that on a daily basis, you'll have 5 ripped books, something that's been trod on, something that needs rescrewing. So we've been putting that away into a box and teaching the children that when we come together, that we'll mend and we'll repair those, and that they can come back out. And when we've invited our older friends into that, we've been absolutely blown away with what happens and the conversations and the things that come from that. So and even things that we just didn't notice. So last week we took a hamper that had come away at the seams, and the strings had come off. And so one of our older friends straight away said, and you're missing a toggle. And so they cut the end off a glue gun and the glue stick, and they wrapped it all together. They were talking about how best to fix that on, that it didn't actually match, so they cut the other toggle off, and it's now got 2 glue sticks on. And the children went back and they were telling their friends, oh look, we've made this, and now it's got a glue gun on it. And somebody else was then using a tool to thread the string back round so that it opens and closes, and all of that really rich language. But it was based again on relationships. They were sitting alongside each other, they were doing all of those things. And I just looked across and we cried, didn't we? Because it's so beautiful. So I looked across the room and there were probably 30 people together. The oldest was 97 and the youngest was 2.5. And they were sitting at the table together. And one was squeezing the glue, the other one was rubbing it off the other person's hands. There was a teacher there who'd been a teacher for 30 years. And her whole body language changes the minute she comes with the children. She straightens up, she counts them, she directs all of us, she goes straight back into teacher mode. These children need different resources to develop this. So even though her mobility is not the same as it was, she just goes into teacher mode, she directs us as if we're her TAs, and tells us what to bring, tells us what to enhance. The Mentors Workshop is just fantastic. So we're going to extend that by asking children to bring things from home, because quite honestly, even though we think that we go through toys and things in nursery and things get broken and are all the time, but actually there wasn't enough, because so many people brought all of those things and then we went back and we put them into nursery and we reuse them. So not only has our bills been reduced, but we're learning how to look after things and how to take care of them, and that we can join together and use all those things. So that would be my top tip, because that has probably been one of the most successful invitations and opportunities that we've had in a long while.
And what you're just describing there to me, or I'm picturing in my head, is that programme on the television called The Repair Shop, where everybody cries and it's so emotional, and it because it makes such an impact on our emotional intelligences, I guess. And describing Liz, listening to you there talking about the 2.5-year-old and the 90-odd-year-old, and that interchange reminded me of a piece of research years ago. Sir Alan Sinclair did a piece of research saying, what was it? He took 1,000 employers and asked, what is it your employees don't have that you would like them to have? And the 2 skills that your story highlighted was the 2 skills that every employer in the world wanted. It was strong, nurturing, close relationships of trust. And, he said, if my staff have a problem, they go to Google. Instead of turning to a colleague who has more experience than them and saying, how would you solve this problem? So that's exactly what you described there is happening in your situation. And that's just huge and can it be undervalued? Wow, that is just spectacular. And the other thing as well was, again, I guess, the slowness and some of your more mature educators now live in a slower pace in their brain, and so our play and our engagement and our invitations, as you called them, Sue, need to be slower. And I don't think that's just true of the older, more mature part of the generation, but I think for a lot of the younger generation as well, who cannot focus, cannot concentrate, cannot do 2 levels of attention, never mind 6 levels of attention. So our younger staff, I'm imagining your younger staff are hugely benefiting from spending time with these older generations as well.
Yeah, I think that's really a critical point, Alice, because when starting from new, we obviously had a brand new team, and we thought very carefully about what we wanted our team to do, first of all, in this intergenerational setting. And what we said is the first thing is you need to make relationships with those older people, find out what they know, what they want to do. And those relationships have been very strong and very enduring. So our young teens say, oh, Elsie just reminds me of my grandma. She's so precious to me. So what we found is we actually love these old people. We are like a family, and we live every day like a family. That's the only way I can explain it. It's not like coming to nursery or coming to visit somebody in a care home. It's like being part of a massive family living under one roof. So we started to call that building our tribe. And, you know, those relationships happen at group level, but where they're very, very significant in terms of being impactful for children are the one-to-one relationships. So naturally, we're not all going to love everybody. There are some people that we gravitate towards more naturally than others, and that happens for children. So we had a lovely little story where one of our little girls, the ear of her bunny came off, and it was her very precious bunny. And we had a conversation about how we could sort this out because she was very upset, and she wanted to go and see Diana. And Diana is living with dementia. But Diana and this little girl were quite close. So we toddled off to Diana's flat, and we found there that Diana had been a sewer, and she had the most beautiful little sewing box, old-fashioned sewing box with all the felt needle cases. So, of course, that ended up being a provocation. It was a learning opportunity. The sewing box, you know, was just beautiful. And Emmy talks about that still. It was so important for her when Diana mended her bunny that their relationship is a really special one that will endure. So it's not just at kind of whole nursery level, it's at child to adult or children to a particular adult that's really powerful for learning.
And you used the terminology there of building your tribe. And I love that picture again, that you're, you know, the connotations it has, because you hear so much again in the media. My husband and I watched something about young men, specifically in China, and how when China had the one child rule per family, and so there's a whole tribe, I guess, of men or level of young men or age of young men in China who can't find a life partner, and they're struggling to find jobs, and they're called the lay down generation because all they do every day is lie down and play games. And it's a huge concern about the amount of young people that don't feel as if they're part of anything, that they don't have a sense of belonging. You know, there's an old Under 3 document called Being, Becoming and Belonging, and you're describing that beautifully. Liz, would you like to kind of pick up on that tribe? You know, how long did it take to create this tribe you're part of now?
I mean, the nursery's been open just over a year. We're coming up to our first celebration, but actually, it almost happened without us trying because one of our curriculum domains is See Me, Hear Me, Know Me, and that's what we based everything upon. So we spent time getting to know people, and people are interested in what we're doing. So the tribe just keeps on growing because we've a group right the way across the country who we meet online, and it's called Born for Life, and they're doing the same type of intergenerational work. One's doing it in a tent in the Isle of Uist, and other people are going to visit care homes. So the tribe is actually beyond the nursery. So it's far-reaching because this is all grassroots stuff. And Sue and I are volunteers as trustees, but there are people doing it all the way across the country, and focusing on what they want to achieve, and just seeing just such massive improvements in outcomes for children. So, you know, the tribe just keeps on growing. So to go back to your question, I think it happened fairly rapidly because instantly we could see that this was something that had legs, really. You know, it was so impactful and just fantastic to watch.
And I think, again, people listening, and I'm listening to you talking about it, and I'm imagining and picturing, and I know there'll be loads of burning questions that I don't want to ask you, like what are the ratios like, and what were the inspectors saying and things like that, and you know, somebody else can talk about that because I don't want to listen to that. But the reality is that what you're describing is the answer to a lot of societal issues at the moment. There's a lot of young people feeling fragile and vulnerable. Our younger staff members in a lot of the nurseries. I sat yesterday with a group of heads, and the stories they were telling me are really startlingly frightening about the younger staff and their ability to focus and concentrate and feel as if they're part of a tribe, if that's the word we want to use. And what you're describing is a really quick and easy way, but not just a quick and easy, because we don't want a sticking plaster. It will have long-term emotional and psychological and intellectual gains for anybody who's involved in it because of that shared experience that they're all having. I mean, that's huge, guys. And I guess, go on, sorry.
Yeah, I think to pick up on the inspectors, we're not doing it because it looks good, and I think people who want to do it because they want to tick the box of this will look good on an inspection, or this will be good for cultural capital, or any of those buzzwords. You really need to unpick your why and why you're doing it, because yes, it might look good for an inspector, and the inspector might think, oh, you're community building, but it goes beyond that. So one of our staff was invited to go for a drink after work with one of our older friends, a lady who used to live in Portugal, and she questioned it and said, is that all right? And we just said, well, of course it is. You feel safe amongst with each other, and of course it is. Now, should we have a policy for that? Well, no, I don't think we should, because that is something that just happens, and they went and they had a drink, and they spent an hour together chatting outside the nursery, and that was fine. And that's how it should be, because they're friends, and that's the top and bottom of it. They're friends.
I think the other thing is, we didn't set out to do this just because we thought it would be a nice thing to do. We set out with a really research kind of motive, which was to prove that a proof of concept that there was a better way to possibly educate children and to care for older people who are really, as we saw it, marginalised and vulnerable groups in our society. Yeah. And we wanted to raise the profile of ageism, both against children and against babies and young children, and against older people, and to prove that by bringing them together, there was a better model. And I think, what we've really learned is that is the case. So, I am tired of reading about children's poor language development and poor social skills. Let's take some action and let's try and find some other ways. And what we've seen for sure is both of those categories that we're most concerned about, our children's progress has really taken a dramatic upward turn. To the point of a young child coming back to nursery the other day saying to me, the opportunities are manifold, a 3-year-old. And I was like, manifold? What does that mean? That's the oldest word ever. And some older person had been talking to them and they just taken a shine to that word. And I just thought, I've never heard that spoken by a 2-year-old in my whole 40 years.
No, absolutely not. And that, because I say, and I hear lots of people saying, if they can say Tyrannosaurus Rex and pterodactyl, geez, they can say lots of brilliant words. If they're in a context that's meaningful and it means something, obviously that little child loved that word. And words do feel fabulous in your mouth, don't they? Yes. Yeah, I mean, just, wow. And so, okay, I think this little conversation has made me think, that I really like the point that you made, guys, about the one-to-one relationship. What you've made me conjure up in my head is one of the little schools that I go to visit is on one of our tiny islands in Argyll and Bute, and there's 110 of a population on this island, and there's nursery and primary on the island. But in the middle of the summer, there's 1.8 million visitors to the island, so it changes massively in the summer. But that little community of 110 is an intergenerational community right there. And that one-to-one relationship that every single one of them knows each other and learns from each other every day. You know, they'll watch the guys fixing the fence or shearing the sheep, or, you know, all these things are life enhancing. So again, you know, that point that you made there about one-to-one relationship, I think is a fantastic piece of inspiration. Yes, we talk about it all the time in our sector, but do we really see it? Can we notice the actions, emotions and words of these two people having those simple, slower conversations? Wow.
I think, you know, we've got in the habit, haven't we, of seeing services as very separate and with a fence around them. So this is what we do for little children. This is what we do for primary children.
Yeah.
This is what we do for secondary. This is what we do for adults with learning challenges. And what we're saying is, if we're short of money, let's take all those fences down. And, you know, creativity is creativity, whatever age. So why don't we have a multi-age community doing the same thing? It makes economic sense. It makes neighbourhood sense. And it just makes common sense as far as we're concerned. So we really want to say, you know, we haven't developed anything special. We've just looked back in history and said, what makes a strong community? And a strong community is an ageless one where age isn't seen as a boundary in any way. So the thing that we've really thought a lot about is in our care village, there are people from aged 60 to aged 100. That's 40 years. So we can't talk about all old people as being useless and, you know, not having a purpose in life. There's 40 years there of living that can give and wants to give something back. So what we've learned from our older people is they don't want to talk about memories forever, making memory boxes. They want to be activists, really rebelling about society now and saying we want a better society for our children in the future and we want to contribute to that. So it's that notion of we want to plant seeds and an oak tree will grow under which we will never sit, but we will have made our contribution. So they're just the perfect group to work with young children, to inspire them and excite them. And, you know, what we've seen is old people are incredibly naughty. They're really playful. You know, they are incredibly playful in their thinking. So they just make children laugh all the time. So
and oh my goodness, there's not enough of that, Sue. There is not enough of that. So I guess to kind of finish our conversation up, for me, as part of the sector of listeners that are listening to your conversation with us, you hear constantly about we've got this issue and this crisis and this challenge and this, but what you're offering us is a solution.
I hope so.
And I thank you for everybody that's listening for that solution that you're sharing with us. So I would love to say a huge thank you to our guests for joining us today and providing us with such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alice Sharp, and the amazing Liz Ludden and fabulous Sue Egersdorff. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. It has just been joyous. I think that's the word for today. If you've been inspired by our conversations today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content. Oh my goodness me. There are trillions of ideas for your settings and Pinterest boards to shop resources relevant to the topics that's been discussed today and throughout our podcast episodes.